On this episode of the Sports Opinions Podcast, 15-year ESPN veteran and the inaugural host of Cold Pizza and First Take, Jay Crawford joins the show as we talk about his time over at ESPN, creating Cold Pizza and First Take with the network, why he hates the NBA right now, and a little bit of Cleveland sports talk. Before we get over the podcast, I want to tell you about two other great shows that you can find. First one is a member of the X Squad Radio found on Spreaker.com. It is the BS3 Sports Show with your host, Ben Sutter III. Great general sports show. It runs live a lot all the time, interactive chats. It's a great show. Second one is Headlock Talk, and that is a wrestling show. Go look it up. It's on iTunes. I know that for sure. So go look it up if you are a big-time wrestling fan. They give out great content, and they always touch on what's going on anything major wrestling. So without further ado, cue the intro. What's up, sports fans, and welcome to the Sports Opinions Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Alex Cuesta, and with me today is a 15-year veteran of ESPN, and he was the inaugural host of Cold Pizza and First Take, Jay Crawford. What's up, Jay?
How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing really well. Anywhere on social media that people can find you, see what you have to say.
I just do Twitter. That's it, JC, and my Twitter handle is J Crawford CLE. That's it.
Nice, very nice. Now, you're a Cleveland guy, obviously, by your handle, and something that I don't know if a lot of the millennial generation even knows what Cold Pizza is, which is kind of funny, but I remember watching the inaugural episode of Cold Pizza, and it was one of the cooler shows that I don't think have been replicated yet. Talk a little bit about Cold Pizza, about it becoming First Take, and just some of your time at ESPN.
Well, nobody had done live morning sports TV prior to Cold Pizza. The only thing really running in the sports universe in the morning was SportsCenter reruns. That was it. So if you were a sports fan and you woke up and you wanted to get the sports news or conversation or debate of the day, you were getting a rerun from the 1 o'clock SportsCenter the night before. And we launched in 2003. And by that point, the notion that a major network would be running taped programming from 8 hours ago, it still blows my mind that it took until 2003. But Mark Shapiro was at ESPN at the time, and he was really trying to grow ESPN2's value. He wanted to get that network in 100 million households, just as ESPN was. And at the time, I believe we were in about 70 or 80. But really, to make it valuable and more attractive to cable operators and ultimately cable consumers, we had to offer something that was different and something that was live. And Cold Pizza was both. So we launched in 2003, and we were the only ones doing live sports television in the morning. Nobody else.
That's pretty
fast
crazy.
Forward,
yeah, it's crazy to think that
later.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. Fast forward 15 years, and there's probably at least 10 live sports shows in the morning that can be viewed nationally on network. So Cold Pizza sort of blazed that trail, and a lot of others have followed. The NFL network has Good Morning Football. Major League Baseball network does a morning show. SportsCenter, because of the ratings that Cold Pizza was doing, was forced to go live too. So they had to try to combat what we were doing, which was kind of cool because when we went on, we were the alternative. And in a span of about 4 or 5 years, the network realized we can't put reruns on anymore because people know that it's taped. There's no immediacy to it. And thus the launch of SportsCenter AM. So it was fun to be a part of something that was a game changer. We were certainly different. We wanted to be a little irreverent, but most importantly, it was something that nobody was used to it. They hadn't seen that before. And it was fun to be a part of. It really was. I enjoyed it. Those were probably my favorite years at ESPN.
That's great. And definitely right from the get-go, you and Dana Jacobson had really good chemistry right from the get-go. And a lot of networks and a lot of channels, like you said, are trying to replicate it. But I haven't seen anyone do what you guys did where it wasn't just you and Dana. You had different segments. You brought in a lot of different personalities on stage to do different segments. And it was just a cool little smorgasbord. And I think to a lot of people like myself, you introduced a Stephen A. Smith and a Skip Bayless to the world with your First Take segment. And then eventually First Take became the name and the whole entire debate program became what it was. But it was something like that was completely different, where it was kind of a nice blend of like sports talk radio with also entertainment.
Yeah, I think what you touched on that was key was the fact that we were a diverse show. So if you didn't like 2 hours of two guys screaming at each other, we were a great alternative because we had breakdown segments from the night before and preview segments for the upcoming games. So when you are talking in particular about like the NBA playoffs, our format was perfect because you could do a complete game recap from the night before, from one of the series from the night before. Then you could look ahead to the games that were tonight, and then you could mix in the debate. So we were giving not just news and information, but we were giving debate. And we were, I thought, before they goofed it up and turned it into 2 hours of a scream fest, I thought it was the perfect blend of morning sports television. Because if you didn't like what we were in now, stay with us. We're going to change in 5 minutes and be in something completely different. But now they oversaturated the debate. It's tough for someone to sit down and watch just two guys yelling at each other for 2 hours. So I thought we were at our best just before we changed the name to First Take, because really that was the beginning of the transition. And then about 2 hours after we changed 2 years after we changed the name to First Take, we became all debate. And once we became all debate, it became I was very disinterested in the format. And that's when I asked for the move to SportsCenter.
Yeah, and the thing is, now it became debate, and you even see morning shows right now, like the current ESPN morning show, Get Up, even though it has Mike Greenberg there, and he's kind of the journalist aspect and the anchor aspect, it really is a lot of just similar format where he's kind of presenting the issue, and then it's debate. And I think they're trying to go a little bit too much sports talk radio style, where it's just a few people kind of bantering at each other, and less of like what you guys did, where you kind of blended the sports talk radio with the Sports Center plus the analysis. And it's kind of what Sports Center is becoming now. It's a little bit of a smorgasbord, what you guys did and what you guys started compared to where it is now.
Yeah. Okay. So very astute observation, by the way. You're clearly paying attention. And I'm not sure how many viewers actually get all the nuance that you just pointed out. But when SportsCenter AM started, they knew they just couldn't recap the night before. It had to be different because that's what the SportsCenter rerun was, just recap from the night before. So they sort of changed the field from, 50% looking back the night before and 50% looking ahead. The late night SportsCenter never did that. So late night SportsCenter was strictly a highlight show. It was just, highlight jockeys ripping through highlights, and that was it. Nothing else. And when SportsCenter AM came around, they knew that they had to be heavy on highlights, but they had to try to advance the story from the night before. So maybe they could dig a little deeper on stats or trends and go a little deeper. And then they started looking ahead to the upcoming day's schedule. But what they never did was they never blended in sports debate. And that's what I wanted them to do when I went over. I was pushing for them to, even if it wasn't the same two guys every day, we should have two people in every day with differing viewpoints, and they can debate the sports stories of the night before and the day looking ahead, much as First Take did the first 2 or 3 years that we were First Take. And honestly, I think nobody's doing that right now. It's the one thing that's missing. And I'm shocked that no one has recreated what First Take was in the first couple of years. Because when Cold Pizza started, there was no debate. We added the debate 9 months in, and we found that it was wildly popular. And for 5 years, we had a very successful run, blending news, entertainment, debate, and looking ahead and highlights. So it really had the best of everything. Nobody's doing that today. And I'm quite frankly surprised by it. I don't know if their point on the horizon with Get Up was what I just explained. If it was, they've missed the mark.
Yeah, I'm disinterested. I'm disinterested in that show completely. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it just doesn't hold me. It doesn't hold me, and there's a myriad of reasons why. I do think that First Take was at its best when it was Skip and Stephen A. And you're talking about two very compelling voices that have star power. And I don't really see anybody on Get Up's roster that can even come close to that. And, I won't for a second try to claim responsibility or credit for the ratings that we achieved on Cold Pizza later in the game and then First Take throughout the run that it was called First Take. It was Skip and Stephen A. They're compelling. They have things to say, and people were interested in what they wanted to see. It was appointment television. Geez, what's Skip going to say about LeBron making that shot at the buzzer to win the game?
Mm-hmm.
I want to see him eat crow. And somehow, some way, he found a way to spin it so LeBron still sucks. But it was interesting because people wanted to find out what he was going to say. And the same with Stephen A. on certain topics. There are things, if a player gets busted for marijuana, they want to tune in the next morning so they can see him scream,
a la
stay
D'Angelo
off
Russell.
the weed.
D'Angelo Russell as of yesterday.
Exactly. So, Skip and Stephen A., in my view, was the perfect blend of morning debate television. It was a shame that it broke up. But, all good things come to an end. And I don't know if they'll ever be reunited. I hope they will because I think they were a terrific tandem. And I think Skip is at his best when Stephen A. is across from him. And I think Stephen A. is his best when Skip is across from him. And wildly, the two had an incredible mutual respect and admiration for one another. They genuinely liked one another. I never saw them speak a crossword off the air. A lot of what you saw on TV was theater, even though they firmly believed the things they were preaching. But they ramped it up for the TV cameras. But, man, they never got personal, and it never stayed tense between the two of them. The show was over. They shook hands. They said, we'll see you in the morning. And they came back fully rejuvenated and ready to go the next day.
You could definitely tell when things are genuine and things aren't. And you could see that kind of on the whole set of Cold Pizza that you guys all seem to kind of genuinely like each other, whether or not you were hanging out after work or not. All seem to have a mutual respect for each other.
Yeah, but that was real. And the one thing that I've always said the camera can detect is authenticity. If you're fake, the camera catches it immediately. If you're plastic, if you're robotic, if you're just, a yucker anchor that's right out of the mold from, 1970 television, people detect that in a heartbeat. When you're real and you're authentic and genuine, the camera not only catches that, but it loves that. And that's what we were. We were an ensemble that genuinely liked each other. We genuinely got along. We all respected one another. And I'm not sure, but I'm willing to bet that if you asked Woody and Skip and Dana, they would probably echo what I'm about to say. Those were the best years of my career. I had the most fun, and it was certainly the most successful. So, I'm speaking for those guys. I could be way wrong. I might be surprised. Skip might say I hated those years, but I'd be surprised if that were the case because we were really having fun doing that show. It was very successful, and It's just a shame that we couldn't keep it together.
Yeah, it really is. And what you touched on with SportsCenter and how they've been trying to blend and what they're trying to do. One of my biggest gripes with ESPN is just the whole change of SportsCenter. I feel like there is a place for the rapid fire highlight show, and there's a place for a cold pizza analysis mixing with the highlight show. Where for me, I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan. I was a New Jersey Nets fan. I've suffered through all the awfulness, but one of the things I used to look forward to was if there was a Nets game, yeah, they might have sucked, but it was cool to watch their highlights, see some of their good plays, and at the end, look at the stats, who they're going to play next, who was the best player, and their record. That whole screen at the end of a highlight was something that 6-year-old me looked forward to, and knowing the stats and learning the names of every player on every team, like that was just something I enjoyed. And now that that's gone, part of me feels like they're losing a little something by trying to play into the entertainment side more than to the sports fan side.
Well, it used to be that SportsCenter was the New York Times of sports journalism, sports television, because they had the 6 o'clock show, which was more featurey and more sometimes even journalistic and in-depth reporting. They had the 11, which was your first East Coast wrap-up from the highlights of the day. Mm-hmm. And then they had the West Coast 1 o'clock, which was the all-encompassing highlight show. What I think bothered me the most was it's become they just play the hit. They almost research themselves into irrelevancy. And by that, I mean, they look at data, they see what happens when they talk about LeBron James and Tiger Woods and the New York Yankees and the Red Sox and the hits. And the numbers go up. But unfortunately, the coasts care greatly about that. But the middle of America, the flyover states, the Houstons, the Kansas Cities, the St. Louises, the Cincinnatis and Milwaukees and Cleveland, they rarely get any play on SportsCenter unless it's the late night highlight show, and they might get a 1-minute highlight rip, and that's it. And then they'll go back to, let's dive into Game 4 of the Bucks and the Celtics. And so it's really become this beast of playing the hits and leaning heavily on the researched can't misses. And they know that if they talk about the Cowboys, that the people watching are going to be interested, and that more people watching care about the Cowboys and the Yankees than collectively care about the Brewers, Indians, Reds, and Cardinals or whatever. So they kind of avoid all those other teams, and all they're really reporting on now are the treetops and the difference makers. So your top 4 teams in the NBA, your top 4 teams in the NFL, and your superstars. Everything else is kind of in the weeds now. And maybe that's because the internet is around and that stuff is all readily available. What's happened to the sports audience is it's become incredibly fragmented. I moved to Cleveland. I've been here 2 years. I don't watch ESPN. I haven't watched ESPN except for a game since I've left. And in all honesty, I wasn't watching ESPN probably the last 4 years I was working there. It just wasn't for me anymore. It was programmed maybe for millennials or for people with attention spans of a 7-year-old. And it just couldn't, it didn't have anything for me anymore. And the times that I see it are when I'm in a public setting, maybe a restaurant or a bar, and it's on. And just from that very small sample size, and it's very small, I can see they're still doing the same thing. It's just interesting to me. And they are trying breathlessly to solve this Rubik's Cube of how they get back to what they once were. But this is unsolvable. They'll never have viewers like they used to, because they used to be the only lion in the jungle, and they were the only ones that could eat. And now there's plenty of predators, and there's a lot of other networks and podcasts and internet sites that are doing the same thing, and many of them are doing it more creatively and better. So they're never going to have the kind of strength in the marketplace that they once had. That iconic cultural breakthrough difference maker. Those days are gone, and I think they understand that. They're just trying to do the best television that they can and hope for the best possible audience they can gather.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm kind of turned off from ESPN in general. And I used to watch ESPN. I used to ingest it all the time. But just the way that SportsCenter has become, and besides games, I'll watch them for games, but even shows that I used to sit down and want to watch all the time, like Around the Horn and pardon the interruption, I'm just not as interested. So I'm surprised that a network like Fox Sports 1 hasn't jumped on the old SportsCenter format and just started ramming it down, because I feel like if they want to get themselves completely on the map, and I've said it on this podcast before, they should really just grasp onto that style of a rapid-fire highlight show where, like you said, Middle America can then get representation. You would get Middle America watching Fox Sports 1 just to see just a bunch of kids to see their favorite team getting a 25, 30, 40-second highlight. I feel like they would do leaps and bounds in terms of rating if they did that.
Yeah, they've tried. Whether it was, Jay and Dan were the wrong combo for that format, or viewers are quite possibly done with that kind of consumption. That's entirely possible. And here's what I mean by that. When you were a kid, and I'm sure you're much younger than I am, your only outlet, your only way to find out if the Royals won and you were living in Los Angeles, you couldn't turn on the local news and get that. You'd have to wait the next day for the newspaper. Your only outlet for that was a national highlight show like SportsCenter. So the demand was great, because if wherever I was in the country, if I couldn't get the Indians game, I didn't have a device that told me if they won or lost. I had to, I'm talking about in the 90s.
Yeah.
I had to turn on SportsCenter and watch it, and that's when the SportsCenter was clearly in its heyday. And everybody at the network was like, "Well, when were we great?" "Well, we were great in the 90s." "Well, who did SportsCenter in the 90s?" "Well, Kilborn and Dan Patrick and Olbermann. So we need personalities like that." No, it was the right tandem at the right time. So there was no way to find out if the Indians won and I was in Houston unless I turned on Keith and Dan and watched SportsCenter. So it was out of necessity that people were watching. Now it's too fractured. I can stream the Indians game on my phone wherever I am in the world. I don't have to wait for anything. And if I'm in a setting where I can't visually watch it, I can follow along with a score panel on my phone and see cartoon characters running around the bases making no noise, and I could be at a banquet watching it. So, technology has changed the way we consume sports information, and it's not a knock on ESPN. I'm not knocking them. Just the game changed. Technology evolved, as it always does, and it will continue to evolve. And the way we got information has changed dramatically. When I was a kid, I had to stay up and watch the 11 o'clock local news to get a Cleveland Indians score. When you were a kid, it was SportsCenter.
Yep.
And today's kids get it on their phone when they're laying in bed.
Yeah.
And so we don't need ESPN anymore. And as a result, I just don't watch it. I don't need it. Everything I want is pumped into my phone in real time. I get alerts when something big happens pertaining to one of my teams. I get alerts when a player is injured on one of my teams. I get them in real time. The teams are pushing out the information now. I got the Browns app, the Indians app, the Cavs app. If anything happens that's earth-shattering with any of those three teams at 3:30 in the morning on a Monday, it's moved to my phone in real time. I don't need to watch SportsCenter anymore, and as a result, fewer and fewer people do. The 6 o'clock SportsCenter used to be the SportsCenter kind of the record of the day. It was a little deeper dive on the big highlights from the night before. Mm-hmm. It was a nice look at what was coming up tonight. It was sometimes featurey, sometimes journalistic. Now, that show's been trying for 10 years to figure out what the hell it is, and they still don't know. And quite frankly, it's irrelevant. They don't need it. They just don't need it. If they were smart, they would make PTI an hour and put it on from 6 to 7. And
Yeah.
I'll guarantee you, they would increase ratings by at least 25%. No one's watching that 6 Sports Center anymore.
No.
But they're still watching PTI because that's appointment TV. It's two of the smartest guys in sports television debating sometimes old and chewed on topics, but they do it in a creative and original way. And if you like it, that's the only place you're getting it. That's it.
Yeah.
So I would move that from 6 to 7, and I would just ditch Sports Center. It costs a lot of money to produce, and there's no return on that investment anymore.
Yeah, you have a point. I feel like I'm just going from a nostalgia sake where I want it back. But, all your points are valid with technology, with everything going on. It's also instant. And you mentioned, about SportsCenter being at its height and the height in the 90s and all that. We're going to transition to something that is currently seeming like it's at its height. But you do not like this. I'm an NBA fan. I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan. I understand that the NBA has a lot of issues. But I still love the product. And I know there's problems on the court with things that go on, but I just enjoy watching basketball. I enjoy watching the pros be good at what they do. You told me you have no love for the NBA right now, and you said you can go on to that length. The floor is yours right now. What is your issues with the NBA?
When the season started, how many teams had a realistic chance of winning the championship?
One.
Realistic.
One.
Why would anybody be interested in that?
Because my Brooklyn Nets have been terrible. And they had a chance of being
right.
That's really it. Yeah.
I mean, every team starts every season with the goal of winning a championship. At least they should. But in football, if I ask you that question, how many of the 32 teams in the NFL have a realistic chance to win the Super Bowl next season?
Probably 5 or 6, depending on at the bottom if you get hot.
I'd say 8.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
How many teams in baseball at the beginning of this season had a realistic chance of winning the World Series?
All 30, because you never know with injuries. You really don't.
I'd say 15.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a number of teams that you can just cross off. The Tigers aren't going to win it.
The Marlins.
The Royals aren't going to win it. You could probably go in every division and find 1 or 2 teams that are just there so the other good teams have someone to play every night.
Yep.
But honestly, if I ask you that question about the NHL, how many teams at the beginning of this season had a realistic chance to win the Cup?
It's more than 10.
My point here, Alex, my point is in the NHL and the NBA and the NFL, anywhere from 40 to 60% of the teams can make a strong case that if things break our way, we could win it all. And in the NBA, I'm down to 1.
I feel like that's just the NBA's thing, though. I feel like they're one of the leagues where teams can get hot and do these dynasties. We had the Lakers, we had the Bulls, we had the Spurs for a little. And
listen,
I think that's just the nature of basketball sometimes.
It is because there's 5 players that are on the court at one time. So one superstar can impact everything. We've seen that with Cleveland. That's the perfect experiment. Cleveland is at the top of the world for a number of years with LeBron James, even though they never won a title in his first trip.
Yep.
They leave. He goes to Miami, teams up with other superstars, and wins a couple of rings. While he's gone, the Cavs turn into the worst team in the NBA. He then rejoins that worst team in the NBA and takes them to the finals 4 straight years and wins a championship. One guy.
Yep.
So, yes, it is the nature of the sport because that is the sport where one guy can make the biggest difference. In baseball, you've got 8 position players and 10 pitchers that rotate through your roster and through your schedule. You have 162 games. You have injuries. There's a million variables. In the NFL, it's a team game more than any other sport. You've got to not just have a great offense, you better have a great defense. So now you need 22 great players or really good players. You know, in the NBA, you can do it with 2 or 3. In baseball, you need 5 or 6. In the NFL, you need 22. You need 5 superstars, really. Like players that are in the top 3 in the league at their position.
Yep.
And so for me, here's the way I break it down. I watch sports because I don't know what's going to happen. Until I know what's going to happen, then I'm not interested.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I've always said with the NBA, one of my main issues is they have a quote unquote soft cap, which just means if you're willing to spend money on the luxury tax, then you can do whatever the hell you want, basically, within certain rules with the max player. They have certain rules, but I feel like the max contracts and the way that they shape the rosters allow for these mega teams, these super teams, these big threes to happen. And we saw it with Boston. And everyone likes to blame LeBron, but people forget that the Celtics started this current iteration of big threes when they went and snagged Kevin Garnett.
They were the ones that started it.
Yeah, so they started everything that's going on. So everyone likes to blame Durant and James, but we can look at Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen and Jason Terry. They're the ones that really got this going.
Oh, so, without question. I don't think anybody debates that. In the old days, when the Lakers and the Celtics were dominant, they had to build those teams through the draft.
Yep.
You know, you weren't signing free agents and you weren't making trades. You had to be really smart at the draft. Now, general managers in the NBA, they're like Maytag repairmen, and you might be too young to understand that reference.
No, I get it.
They're not doing anything. They're just not. And I don't mean to disrespect an entire class of sports general managers, but there's not much for them to do. There really isn't.
And the few that do
the players are recruiting other free agents. So if LeBron goes to a place and LeBron's a popular teammate, he'll have no problem recruiting other talent to Cleveland, Miami, or LA.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's not, and people don't want to play with him, they're not going to go there. And there isn't a GM in the world that can pull off a deal that a player doesn't want these days. We saw what Kyrie did to demand a trade out of Cleveland.
Yep.
Go ahead. Keep me here. Don't trade me. And you're going to get nothing for keeping me because I'm not re-signing. Players are running the NBA more than any other product, and it's completely lost me. I'm completely disinterested. I casually glanced at the scores the next day. I haven't watched a dribble of the NBA playoffs since game 1 of the NBA Finals last year.
And that's just sad when they lose someone who's you are obviously a legitimate fan. You eat, sleep, and breathe sports. That's why you got into it. And it's just sad to see. And I think one of the big fixes would be, and it's not going to happen because Adam Silver, he loves the popularity. He's a person pleaser, and everyone thinks he's the greatest. Commissioner of all sports. I do not think he's one of the greatest commissioners of all sports. I think he's just riding this wave of superstardom, and I think it's hurting the NBA in the end. Because when LeBron goes,
I give him credit.
Who the hell takes that mantle?
I give him credit, though, because it's a superstars league, and he's figured that out, and he's just given them the keys to the castle.
Yeah, but when LeBron goes and Zion doesn't turn out to be LeBron light, like everyone's predicting, I don't think he's going to be. I think he's Sean Kemp at best, and if he's Sean Kemp, that's an amazing career. It's not a knock on Sean Kemp. That's a Hall of Famer. That's one of the best players of all time. But if he doesn't turn out to be that guy, then who? Kevin Durant is not that guy. I love Kevin Durant's game, but he is very, very touchy. LeBron just started getting touchy later in his career. In the beginning of his career, he was very professional. He didn't say anything wrong. When people started going at him late in his career when he accomplished things, he kind of turned around and said, you know what, screw all of you. I'm the best player on the planet. Leave me alone.
Now he has no time for any of it, and I don't blame him. But
no,
for me, Kevin Durant is the man that killed basketball for me. And I know that he's not the only one to do what he did. LeBron jumped team to team chasing rings. We've seen other superstars do it. But if I had to list a favorite player of mine right now, without question, it's Russell Westbrook.
Easily.
I think he's got the best game. I think he can have the most impact. And I think he's the one guy that has been loyal to his fan base.
If Russell If he was 6'6", he's Michael Jordan, he's Kobe Bryant with the way he plays. And I don't think there's any doubt about that. Just his style and his aggression. If he's 6'6", then that is that player, 100%.
Yeah, the only thing he lacks is the size.
Yeah.
He is as athletic. He does everything. He plays hard. He'll play hurt. He gives it 110% every night.
Without a doubt.
And when he has a chance to leave and go play in one of the limelight locations, he said, "No, you know what? I think I'm good here. I'm going to reward the fans that have made me who I am."
Mm-hmm.
And there's not enough of that in pro sports, and it's sad because while he's my favorite player, Kevin Durant is my least favorite player of all time in any sport.
Wow.
When he left Oklahoma City and went to the Golden State Warriors, it was, to me, the weakest move I've ever seen by a professional athlete. He ruined the game.
Okay. That's you know what? And you're not the only person with that opinion. I don't share that opinion. I think I hate the move. I hate the move of they beat me, I'm going to go join them. But I look at it. He's doing what's within the rules of the league right now. Whatever is allowed, and that's what he's doing.
No,
he's trying to win.
I couldn't agree more. The league tolerates that. That's what it's about. It's about every 3 or 4 years, these marquee players put on their little free agent tours, and it's like they're being recruited to go to college all over again. And I get that. I understand it. He did. It was completely legal, but honestly, it ruined the game. He couldn't. This is what blows my mind. He's got another marquee superstar player on his hip. He takes the Warriors and puts them in a 3-1 hole, and then he disappears.
Yep.
He just goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And they lose game 5, and they lose game 6, and they lose game 7, and then he goes and joins the evil empire. I'm sorry. And you know what? It's going to dog him the rest of his career. That will be in the first line of his Hall of Fame paragraph when he's inducted into the Hall of Fame. It will be in the first line of his obituary. He's always going to be that dude. He's the guy that went and joined the basketball behemoth because he couldn't beat them.
And I think he's banking on the fact
in Oklahoma City and lost in the Western Conference Finals every year of my career than to jump ship and go chase rings with other superstars. Because I got news for you, Kevin. They won rings before you got there, and they don't need you to win the ring this year. They just don't.
It's true. It's true. But I think he is banking on the fact that he saw certain other great players. He saw Karl Malone. He saw Charles Barkley, who just didn't have the hardware. And while they're considered all-time greats, they're never put up there with your championship greats. And I think he was just banking on the fact that 20, 25 years, 30, 40, 50, however many years from now, they're just going to count his rings. They're going to look at his stats, and they're going to mention the other players, but they're not going to remember I think that's what he's banking on.
Those rings have asterisks, and they always will. Those are tarnished rings.
Yeah.
You want to impress me? You want to impress me? Stay in Oklahoma City and win one with one of the game's greatest players.
Would it impress you if he goes over to Washington and wins one? Would that help his legacy? Would that fix his legacy?
That's the only way he fixes it. Because right now, he's just a ring chaser. He joined 3 of the game's best players currently. He ran over there and helped them win another ring. That's what he did.
Now, if he goes over to the Knicks and does something like that, what would that do for him? Because I'm a Nets fan. I want him nowhere near the Knicks. But if he does that, now that's what impresses me. Kevin Durant is for him to go somewhere and build that team and win with the team that's not ready made.
Absolutely. But when you're doing it with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, really? I mean, dude, they won without you. They punked you when I had them up 3-1. You couldn't put them away. So you went and joined them. And that's just mind-boggling. That is and you know what? When the Birds and the Jordans and the Barkleys and
Isaiah
the
Thomas.
Ewings of the world look at that, I can only imagine what they're saying under their breath and behind the curtain, because that's not impressive. It just is not impressive. Imagine if Michael
Kobe
Jordan would have
Michael.
said, "You know what? I'm done losing to the Pistons. I'm done. I'm demanding that I go to the Pistons, or I'm a free agent. I'm going to the Pistons now." Are you kidding me? I mean, Michael Jordan said, "No, I'm going to get over this hump. I'm going to figure out a way to knock the Detroit Pistons from their throne." And I think if in a real moment of truth and honesty, Kevin Durant would tell you in a heartbeat that a ring in Oklahoma City would have meant way more to him than 3 rings in Golden State. 4 rings, whatever he ends up with.
Now I got a question for you. Does the fact that all these players are friends off the court, does that really affect their decisions and their ease? Because they're all like you said, they're all pitching to each other. And one of the reasons why I love Russell Westbrook is in season, he hates everybody else besides the 11 guys that are on his team. He hates everybody. He doesn't want to be friends with anybody else besides his team. Where you had Kevin Durant.
That's also why he's one of my favorites. You know, that's the way it should be.
Yeah, and you had Kevin Durant and LeBron James mid-season
Couldn't stand
doing an ESPN piece in a truck together, talking about how they're the 1 and 2. Would Kevin Durant basically admitting he's the number 2 player in the world? Would you have ever seen Kobe in a car with Michael in his second season in the NBA, rookie year in the NBA with Michael, sitting in a car going, "Yeah, Michael's Michael. I'm trying to get there." No, Kobe would have turned around and been like, "Man, I'm going to dunk on you. And I'm going to kick your ass.
I want what you have, and I'm going to come take it from you." And it's the same thing with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. They had no use for each other during their careers.
No.
They had a respect for one another, but they also hated each other's guts. After the career was over, guess what? We'll do commercials. We'll make money together. We'll share good times and laughs, and we'll be friendly. But when they were both in their 20s and beating each other's brains in, they wouldn't have helped them off the street.
Yeah, and love.
And that's the way I'd rather – I wish – and I'm not saying that these guys have to hate each other. What I'm saying is there is – when you're going for a championship, I don't understand how the second the game is over, they're hugging and kissing and laughing at midcourt. And I've always said the fan suffers defeats way harder than the players sometimes, because there's no paycheck for the players.
Yeah, money has a lot to do with it.
Sure, they're comfortable. They're all comfortable.
Yep.
And in the 80s and 90s, players were very, very wealthy, but they didn't have this kind of forever money like they have now. There's so much money in the game now, it's ruined it. And the other sports to me are so good that as much as I love basketball and as much as I love watching a competitive game where I don't know the outcome, I just can't spend any of my valuable time sitting in front of a television for 2.5 hours when I know it's going to come down to the last 2 minutes and the team with the most superstars on their roster is going to win. There's no drama. There's no suspense. And I don't watch it. I have no use for it.
I see where you're coming from. I can say I haven't watched much of the playoffs since my Nets got knocked out. I've watched here and there, but I'll watch the Nets next year. I'm not as disgruntled as you about it, but I get exactly where you're coming from. I think a lot of fans are coming from where you are. Now, switching gears, we're going to touch quickly on some Cleveland sports things before we wrap it up. I want to talk about right now, and I had on Rod Bloom. He's a Cleveland sports guy. A little while ago, I had him on, and I kind of came to the realization, which he had already, but I came to the realization that it's been pretty good to be a Cleveland sports fan the past 5 to 10 years. you've had the Cavs' success winning a championship. You've had the Indians being in the championship not too long ago and playing well, and they're playing pretty good this season already. And now you have the Browns hype, where the Browns hype is absolutely real. I had them picked going to the playoffs last year. They just missed. So I was ahead of the train with my Browns hype, but now they are the darling. Just talk to me right now about, you've been a Cleveland sports guy forever. I don't know if you were friends with Mike Golick when you were at ESPN, but I know he's a Cleveland sports guy. How is it to be the Cleveland sports fan now, where everybody was laughing at you guys before, and now it's just kind of like, yeah, haha, laugh what? I have championships and good teams.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, even with all of the excitement, even though it's never really clicked all at once, although the Indians were one win away and played 3 World Series games knowing that one more win and they win a World Series, their first since 1948, and 4 months after the Cavs won the NBA championship. So as great as that would have been, it was probably the most exciting 5 months of my entire sports fandom. The problem is LeBron's now gone.
Yep.
And I'm afraid the Indians' window has closed.
I think they win the division.
They may. I mean, injuries have been their enemy again. Clevenger is on the 60-day, and Kluber just broke his arm. And the bats are atrocious. They're just not hitting. They're not scoring runs. And as much as I'd like to see them win a World Series, I think they're going to – a lot of things are going to have to start going their way if that's going to happen this year. And, they're if they're not drastically better by July, you will likely see – I don't know about Kluber now because I don't even know if he's going to pitch again before the trade deadline. But you may see Bauer move because when you're the Cleveland Indians, you have maybe a legitimate 2 or 3 year window every 10 years.
Yep.
You can't build this team through signing free agents because even though they've signed some significant free agents the last 4 years, they're not going to be the team that goes out and spends the $300 million for a marquee player. When Frankie's up, he'll be gone. He doesn't want to entertain. Oh, he's been awesome. But Cleveland, to be relevant, has to draft smarter than any other team. They have to go out and find these can't-miss young prospects. And the sad reality of it is, hope you get 6 good years out of them and then trade them in July of their last year so they can wash, rinse, and repeat and do it all over again. And that's a tough way to live as a fan, but that's the reality of it. They can't spend $225 million on team payroll, and they can't afford to keep. We've seen one after another, going back to Albert Bell and Manny Ramirez, and Jim Thome eventually left.
Yep.
That's the way it happens. These players can stay here for a number of years, and then we lose them. It's almost like we're a AAA team for the Yankees or the Cubs or the Dodgers or the team that's going to go out and write the big check. And I thought it was refreshing. Last year, the Indians lost one of their top players in Carlos Santana to free agency, and they brought him back this year. And I thought that was he wanted to come back, which I thought spoke volumes for, he could have gone to one of the coastal teams. He didn't like the National League. He didn't have the same success. He's been tearing the cover off the ball this year.
Yep.
And I'm thrilled that he's back. But, you see too many players chasing the big dollars. Frankie will, in my mind, play out the next couple of seasons. And when he is in July of his last year at the deadline, he'll be moved to the team that gives the Indians the most prospects. And that's the way it goes, But, I'm okay with that because hopefully we'll get the best years out of him. We got the best years out of CC Sabathia. I think we got some tremendous years out of Manny Ramirez. We got the best years out of Jim Thome. I'm fine with guys staying here for 6 years and then another team overpaying for them for 10 years. Who's the team that's signed a player to a 10-year contract that's won the World Series? Who's done that?
The Yankees once with Alex Rodriguez. That's it.
No, because if you remember, A-Rod signed that 10-year deal with the Rangers.
Oh, that's true. They didn't technically sign them. They just ate the money.
Well, yeah, they traded for him.
Yeah, you're right.
You know?
There's no one that's really made that actual mega deal that's seen the success.
No. Manny Machado, you think he's going to bring us a World Series to the Padres?
Nope.
What about Mike Trout? Think he's going to win one with the Angels?
I would hope so because he's the Mickey Mantle of this generation, but it's probably not.
I would too. I would hope so too, but has he played in a playoff series?
No, sadly enough.
Okay. What about
Bryce Harper?
What about Bryce Harper? Has Bryce Harper played in a World Series?
No, but that Phillies team is young enough, and that can be his shot. Phillies are a good team, but is it likely there?
Could happen.
It's difficult. It's difficult. At MLB, it's very difficult to get there.
So the reason I bring that up is if you go back and you look and you study these 10-year, $250 to $300 million deals, they strangle a team. They're on the hook for so much money. Look what happened after the Tigers signed Miggy.
Yeah,
they're the worst team. They're one of the worst teams in baseball right now.
Mm-hmm, without a doubt.
They got so one player heavy. And by the way, when Miggy signed that huge deal, he was already 29 or 30. So you're trying to project a player into his late 30s, still performing at a $30 million level. It's just lunacy. CC Sabathia couldn't do it. Alex Rodriguez. How do you live up to a 10-year, $250 million contract when you're in Texas? You can't. and it becomes an albatross for you and the team, and it leads to a trade. So, in my view, I don't think that's the way to win a World Series. I just don't. I think it's a colossal waste of money.
Yeah, but we're going to continue to see it happen because of money.
Players.
Yeah.
It takes so many players. If it was basketball, go ahead, knock yourself out. It might lead to a championship. But, if you throw whatever pitcher you want into that mix, is the pitcher really going to have that big of an impact when he's only on the field every fifth day? And if you're really lucky and he's extremely durable and a Hall of Fame caliber arm, he may throw 3 times in a World Series. Guess what? You got to win 4.
Yeah.
And the other team's going to have good ones still.
Absolutely.
So you need depth. You need a whole bunch of $15 million guys that are going to perform at their best when the lights are at their hottest. That's the key.
You were talking Billy B. Moneyball right
team.
there completely. That's Moneyball style where you just have a collective of very, very, very good players as opposed to the 3 or 4 superstars and a bunch of above average players and hope that it all clicks at the right time.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's what baseball's become. Now, a team that has been building and is now coming to the forefront are your Cleveland Browns. With Baker Mayfield in his sophomore season, where you guys are hoping he doesn't go through a sophomore slump. I hope he doesn't because I think he's extremely entertaining. But you guys also add Olivier Vernon. Odell Beckham Jr. obviously comes over there. Sheldon Richardson comes over there. A lot of personalities are there, but if they click, holy crap, they're going to be really good.
Well, that's the key. They've got to click because, as you know, building a championship team in any sport, it's a chemistry experiment. It really is.
I think Baker could lead them there, though. I think Baker has the charisma and the personality to command men.
Yeah, I think that he absolutely could lead them there. But the great unknown, the thing that you can't measure, you can't see, you can't track it down, is chemistry. It happens organically, and it either happens or it doesn't. I've seen teams bring together a collection of young, talented, some of even superstars, and fail miserably
Yep.
because they hate each other. And I've seen other teams with moderate to above average talent, but all of a sudden they catch a wave and they play for each other and they love being around one another and they're greater than the sum of its parts. And they win a championship. When what was the intangible? Why did no one see this coming? Because you can't see chemistry. You can't measure it. You can't predict it. It happens in real time in experimental fashion. What happens when we drop Odell Beckham Jr. in this clubhouse or in this locker room? We're about to find out. We don't know. Hopefully good things.
I'm hoping that him having a friend in Jarvis Landry being there, and they're already very good friends, I'm hoping that right there is going to kind of hold him back from his, outwardly it looks selfish, but you've been an athlete, I've been an athlete, and I really see sometimes he's being a selfish show-off, but I do feel that when they do say that he just wants to win, I see that in him sometimes too, where he knows he's open and he knows he can beat a guy out and he knows that he could have made a play and he just doesn't know how to accept the loss in that moment. So I'm not trying to defend Odell. I think he's been super immature a bunch of times in his career, but I'm not always going to knock him. And I'm hoping that a guy like Jarvis being there is going to kind of keep him grounded. Like, we'll get it next time. You know how good we are. We can't be stopped. Let's do this. That's my hopes for them right now.
Because I think Jarvis isn't just a friend. He's a mentor.
Yep.
And he's someone that Odell honestly looks up to and admires and respects. And I called the Browns preseason games last year for TV. I spent time around this team in the preseason. And the one thing that I noticed immediately, and it was apparent if you watched Hard Knocks, was that Jarvis Landry is better in a leadership role than he is as a talented wide receiver. And that's saying something.
Yeah,
because that dude can ball.
Yes, he
but
can.
He is even more important to this team as a leader. So I think he's going to kind of be the traffic cop, if you will, for Odell.
Yep.
I think I don't want to say he's going to keep him in line because that implies that he'll have a tendency to go outside the line. I just think he's going to be that he'll be that constant in your face presence of staying focused on the prize, which is a team-oriented prize. It's not MVP of the league. This guy wants to be the Super Bowl champion. And if the MVP of the league happens to come along with it, that's icing. But the cake is the Super Bowl, the grand prize. And I think John Dorsey has done a remarkable job rebuilding this team. I don't even want to say from the ashes. The ashes had blown away.
He's one of the best GM in football right now. Easily one of the best GMs in football.
Well, look at his work in Kansas City.
Yep.
And now look what he's done for the Cleveland Browns.
Now, I think
he's a smart football guy, man. He gets it.
And I think the Browns have two things going for them. One they can control and one that they kind of can't. The thing they can control is nobody's talking about that defense that was really good last year and only got better. And I think that defense is going to be stellar. And the other thing is that I think that division's in decline. The Steelers are just, they're not inept because they're never inept. They have a great coach, great quarterback. They lost a running back and they ended up getting another 1,000-yard back. Juju's there. I don't know how they're going to replace AB, but they're still a threat. The Ravens are bad. I don't believe in Lamar at all. And the Bengals have just taken 93 steps back. So I think you have those two things going in your favor where it can give the offense time to gel earlier in the season if it's not there right away.
I give each team a range of wins every year. I don't pick playoff teams. I don't pick records. I don't pick Super Bowl champions. I give every team a realistic win total range. Anything else is just throwing darts in the dark. You have no idea if a team's going to win 12 games because you don't know what's going to happen on the injury front. And the injuries in the NFL have more to do with who wins than any other sport. So what I would say is last year I gave the Browns as a realistic win total 8, as an optimistic win total 9, and as a pessimistic win total 5. But they were anywhere from a 5 to a 9-win team.
That's fair.
I think and it's still fluid because teams are still fluid. Yep. Rosters, there will be changes.
Mm-hmm.
As I look at the division right now, I have the Steelers as a pessimistic 6-win team, a realistic 8-win team, and an optimistic 9-win team. That's where Cleveland was last year.
Yeah. I think
now I have
the
Browns pessimistically as a 7-win team,
mm-hmm.
realistically as a 9-win team, and optimistically as an 11-win team. That's where the Steelers were last year. So in the span of 1 year, the doormat of the league and the champion of the league, of their division, have switched. The Steelers are now where the Browns were, and the Browns are where the Steelers were. And that is all John Dorsey.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah, and I like the way you look at that. I think that's a different way that people kind of love to predict win-losses, and I think a range is definitely the best way to go. I would just disagree.
I know it's
I think they're realistically, I think they're realistically a 10-win team. I really do. The talent puts them at 10.
They could, but I'll also say this. Almost every year in the NFL, there is a team that becomes the sexy pick
mm-hmm.
because they made a huge leap the year before. And I'm not saying the Browns are going to be that team in 2019. I'm not at all. In my heart, I don't believe they will be. But what I'm saying is I'm pointing out you can go back the last 20 years and you can find that team that went from 3 wins to 7 wins or 8 wins, and they suddenly become the sexy pick for the next year. Oh, that curve is going to continue. They're going to win 10 or 11, and they could be in the Super Bowl. Every year, go back and look. There's been that team. And oftentimes, I'm not saying every time, oftentimes the ball doesn't bounce their way. They suffer a key injury. They lose 3 out of the 4 to start. The first 4 games in the NFL season, it's the most important quarter stretch in sports.
Got to go 2-2
and people will say,
"Oh,
that's nonsense."
Yep, 2-2
well,
at
people
minimum.
will say, some people say that's nonsense. It's the last 4 games of the NFL season, or it's the last 10 games in the Major League season. No, the NFL. You go back and look at stats through 4 games. Teams that are 1-3 make the playoffs something like 16% of the time. Teams that are 3-1 go on to make the playoffs something like 75% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Once that snowball gets rolling in the NFL, it can take on a life of its own, and it can carry you all the way to the playoffs. Conversely, start 1-3, and then go into the building in week 5 and see what the mood is in there. See what the temperature is.
Yep.
Guys aren't coming to work in a good mood. Guys are pissed off. Guys aren't playing as hard because they think it's already over. Well, the numbers tell us we can't make the playoffs. The next thing you know, that 1-3 is 2-9. And then they're playing for the draft choice. So, I'm not by no means am I saying that's going to happen to the Browns. It will happen to one team next year. There will be a team that made a big improvement in 2018 that folks are pointing to be a playoff team in 2019, and they will slip and fall, and they'll be injured, and they'll get a lot of bad luck, and they're going to take a step back. That's the NFL. And that's why I love it, because we don't know what's going to happen. Who picked the Eagles 2 years ago?
Not I.
Nope.
I
Who
like
thought
that.
the Rams could be in the Super Bowl after where they were 2 years ago?
I thought playoffs, but not Super Bowl. No, I didn't say Super Bowl. I said
Super
playoffs,
Bowl.
but not Super Bowl. No, definitely not.
Sure. So you just don't know. You never know. Here's the one thing you do know. You used to know 2 things. The Patriots were going to be great, and the Browns were going to stink. And now we don't know that anymore.
And that's nice.
We don't know.
Yeah.
It is nice.
I like that you come full circle with that. And the last observation I'm going to do on the Browns, which is good for the Cleveland fans, and I think will help an outlook, even though the outlook's already good. Over the last 3-4 years, I have to say, since Dorsey's been there, the Browns have consistently won free agency and won the draft off of making big impact starter talent picks. This year, I think they won free agency, but if you look at what Dorsey did this draft, he didn't go after any sexy superstar big time. He didn't make any moves. He filled in any holes, any depth. And when you have a team and when you're at the point where you're making depth picks in the draft, that means that you think you have a legitimate team and your roster is there. So if Dorsey is picking teams like that, the team is ready to go and he's a smart guy, that's a good sign for Cleveland fans.
Dorsey has been at the point for 2 Cleveland Browns drafts. I'll argue with anybody in football. He's won both drafts. And here's why. He no doubt won the draft last year.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
without a doubt.
With the first and the fourth pick, you expect to get impact guys. You don't expect to get Pro Bowlers.
Mm-hmm.
Denzel Ward made the Pro Bowl.
Monster.
And was injured.
Yep.
Missed time and made the Pro Bowl. Baker Mayfield, if not for Hugh Jackson, would have made the Pro Bowl and the Browns would have made the playoff.
Yep, without a doubt.
And I'll tell you, I was at almost every practice this spring or this summer for Browns training camp. It was obvious from the third day that Baker Mayfield had the better arm. It was just obvious. And if you go back, and NFL Network just replayed that Thursday night game between the Jets and the Browns.
I'm a Jets fan. I remember it.
I was in a hotel in Vegas, and I was just flipping around, and the NFL Network was on. So I actually watched that game all over again. I was at the game, and I'd forgotten what a juxtaposition it was from Tyrod Taylor, who I think was like 2 of 12 when he got injured, and balls were fluttering and missing their targets. And the second they make the quarterback change, Baker comes in and completes 4 balls just before the half and gets them into field goal range for a kick. And these balls look like thunder and lightning coming out of his hand.
Yep.
I mean, rocket shots right on the guy's numbers.
The confidence.
Boom, boom, 15 yards, 20 yards, 15 yards, 12 yards, field goal. And everybody in the and I'm telling you, there was a palpable energy in that stadium. If they would have turned the lights out, they would have come back on from the juice that was in that stadium.
Jay, I have to tell you, as a Jets fan, watching that, the moment he came on and that happened, I knew the game was over and the Jets were going to lose.
You could feel it.
You knew it.
You could feel
it. You knew that there was no chance. The Jets were dominating every single facet of that game. Every facet.
Well, think about that game, Alex. When you look back on that game, 4 drives into that game, Baker's wearing a baseball hat, and you're watching the Jets, and you're saying, "Oh my God, they've got their quarterback."
Yep.
And they likely do have their quarterback.
I like Sam.
But you're watching him dismantle a really good Browns defense.
Yeah.
And you're literally going, "Wow, maybe the Browns took the wrong guy." If you weren't watching carefully in training camp. Yeah. I wasn't saying that because I knew what Baker could do. I watched him in practice every day.
Yep.
But if you're watching in middle of America, you might be saying, wow, the Browns drafted the wrong quarterback. Their guy's in a baseball hat, and the Jets are up 14-0.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, an injury happens. Baker comes out, and it was right out of a Hollywood movie. Guy comes into the game and immediately changes everything. Suddenly, the Browns defense doesn't give up another point.
Yeah,
the Browns offense is moving the ball up and down the field at will.
They were just energized, and I have to make this quick observation, and this might end up deciding my Jets fandom in the next 10 years. The Jets are responsible for creating Tom Brady. They knocked out Drew Bledsoe. I was pumped. Tom Brady comes in. The Jets ended up winning that game, but now we know who Tom Brady is after that. The Jets knocked out Taylor. Baker Mayfield comes in, wins that game, goes on. If Baker Mayfield goes out and wins like 4 Super Bowls and the Jets still suck, I'm going to be so pissed.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll interrupt that train of thought for you, because in the case of Brady, if not for the injury to Bledsoe, we may never have known about Tom Brady.
Yep.
The guy was a 7th round or 6th round draft pick. Drew Bledsoe had just signed a long-term deal.
Mm-hmm.
If Drew Bledsoe stays healthy for the next 5 years, Tom Brady might actually be Matt Castle.
Yeah.
You know, we may never have known. But
Matt Castle, Matt Flynn, one of those guys.
Your other narrative on the Jets, even if the Jets hadn't knocked Tyrod out of the game, we were going to find out who Baker Mayfield was.
Yeah.
He was a first-round draft pick. He was number 1 overall. Tyrod clearly wasn't the guy. And even if he hadn't been concussed, he would have been replaced.
Yeah.
Likely in the second half, because it was clear he had nothing that night. Nothing. And the fans were already chanting for Baker. After 4 drives, they were chanting Baker.
I mean, I was chanting Baker as a Jets fan. I just wanted to see him play, honestly.
Taylor couldn't throw it. He couldn't hit a barn.
No.
And you know, so we would have, I don't know that it would have been that night, but we would have found out who Baker Mayfield is and would become, because he was going to get his chance. Yeah. I don't know that Brady ever would have gotten a chance if Bledsoe had been as healthy as Brady is.
Yep.
Let's face it. Look at the list of quarterbacks that the Patriots have drafted in the Tom Brady era.
A lot.
It's stunning.
A lot.
It's stunning.
Almost one every 2 years. He almost won every 2 years.
Belichick drafts.
Nope.
They never get to see the field, except for Matt Castle when Brady had the one substantial injury of his career. And it happened early in the season, and Matt Castle performed out of this world. And guess what? I just did an NFL broadcast boot camp a couple of weeks ago. Matt Castle was there.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy how things like that work out.
He's done, you take him out of that system, and he just hasn't been the same guy. He had great success that year, getting the Patriots to the regular season with no Tom Brady, and everybody was saying, wait a minute, is it system or is it quarterback now? Well, we know that it's both.
Mm-hmm.
Because Brady has flourished in that system, and that system has flourished because Brady is in it. And so I don't even know if it's a chicken or an egg, but I can tell you that this is the perfect lightning in a bottle scenario that we'll never see again in the history of the NFL. You have the greatest quarterback of all time and the greatest head coach of all time for an 18-year period in one city. Well, yeah, they better have 5 Super Bowl rings. That's just how it shakes out.
Yep, and they're not done. Now, before we close out here, your ESPN contract situation is well known. It's public. Once that wraps up, what is next? Do you have anything planned? What's on the horizon for Jay Crawford?
I do. I'm signed through July. I can sign a new contract in August, and I will. And I can't announce it yet because I'm still signed with ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very much looking forward to my next chapter. I can't wait. The worst part about a 2.5-year paid vacation
practice
is
retirement,
not being able,
which is pretty funny.
Practice retirement. The worst part of that is not being able to perform the craft that I so dearly love. And, people a lot of times look at it and say, my God, you hit the lottery. You're well paid for 2.5 years and it's a vacation. You don't have to go to work. Well, that gets really old after about 3 months. There's only so much golf you can play before you really get the desire to scratch that itch. Fortunately for me, ESPN has let me do a number of side projects while I'm on the sidelines. They let me work for the Patriots as their TV host for their Super Bowl network. They let me call the Browns preseason games. And most recently, they allowed me to do the Big 3 draft, which was in Las Vegas a couple of nights ago. All of those things were perfectly timed and spread out by about 9 months. So I've never been too very long without a TV iron in the fire. And I've been listening to offers for the last 2 years. I had a really strong feeling. I knew what it was going to be, and that's exactly what it's going to end up being. And I couldn't be happier about it.
And so I'm excited, and not to kiss your ass or anything, but when you were on ESPN, when you were doing SportsCenter, Cold Pizza, if you were on the screen, I more than likely gave it a good amount of time. I'm not going to say because I was always flipping. Our attention span nowadays is like -3. But if you were on the screen, I definitely gave it more of a look than not. So I'm excited for you to see what you're doing next, because you are very good at your craft. You're one of the top anchors in sports, and I think a lot of people would agree. So I'm excited for your next step, and I'm also extremely appreciative that you decided to come on here, Jay. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem, Alex. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Again, Jay, do you want to give, you're on Twitter at J Crawford CLE?
That's it. Yep.
Beautiful. And again, this was the Sports Opinions Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Alex Cuesta. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at @A_Cuesta30. Find Sports Opinions on Twitter at SportsOpinion30, Instagram SportsOpinions30. Visit us on the Facebook page. Find this podcast and other great ones on anywhere you can hear a podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Once again, Jay Crawford was with me, 15-year ESPN veteran. I'm your host, Alex Cuesta. Sports Opinions Podcast. Have a good one, everybody.